things that drive you nuts and you just wish that physician
Yes.
executives would stop?
Yes. So again, this is your nature and it's hard to fix, but you guys want to know everything about everything sometimes before you're ready to make a decision. And
True.
it can be rather exhausting.
Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. I'm your host, Lee Scheinbart, and today's podcast features a special guest who has worked closely with many chief medical officers in various health systems and a guest well-versed on the role of the CMO in healthcare today. Today's guest is Mr. Tim Norton, the Chief Legal Officer and Vice President at Augusta Health in Virginia. Mr. Norton grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and attended the George Mason University. He went on to earn his Juris Doctorate at Widener Commonwealth School of Law in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and his Legum Magister, otherwise known as a Master of Law, in Health Law through Loyola University, Chicago. Tim, as always, it is great to see you, and welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lee. Yeah, no, it's great to see you again.
So for the listeners, Tim and I lived in the same neighborhood and we worked at the same health system before he accepted the role of chief legal officer in Virginia and packed up and left the hood. And while we worked together, we accomplished many, many things, most of which I think we can both be very proud of. And I think that the best part of working with you was that you allowed me to execute my first rule of working with lawyers. You gave me the grace to allow me to think that I could do this. And I say that with affection, because you're very smart and you let me get away with the idea that I was acting on the rule, even though you totally objected, if not outright rejected its premise. Do you remember my number one lawyer rule?
I honestly don't remember it.
The
I'm
rule
excited
is,
to hear it again.
yeah,
Yeah.
let me remind you that
Okay.
I hate asking a lawyer a question and getting the reply, well, it depends. And I imagine that just like they teach us in medical school on day one, they teach us, trust me, I'm a doctor.
Right.
They must teach you on day one at law school or even at orientation to say, it depends. So I have a rule that requires that when working with a lawyer, you must present the lawyer with your problem and tell them to find a way to lawfully solve it rather than ask them what to do about the problem. If you ask them rather than tell, you're going to get a response. It depends every single time, right?
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. I mean, yeah, I mean, they, I don't think they've outright use the phrase "it depends," but it always, when you're presented with a problem as a lawyer, I'm always thinking, what is my client not telling me? So that's why it comes out as "it depends," because then you end up learning additional facts along the way.
That
Yeah.
is classic.
Yeah.
The other phrase that I learned a lot about is, what's my exposure? Now,
Oh
if
yeah.
I say that to you as your client, what goes through your head when I say, what's my exposure?
I start thinking about dollars more than anything right now. And of course, then it comes from dollars, and it goes to who am I dealing with? If I'm dealing with a physician, it goes to professional reputation and reporting requirements. But I mean, it can go down a litany of lists there.
You
But
mean
yeah.
you don't have what kind of bad dude am I dealing with when he asks me what's my exposure?
No, I mean, come on, I'm a lawyer, so I'm used to dealing sometimes with bad dudes.
Well, let's get started with this because
Yeah.
this is going to be a great show. What was your original plan when you chose to attend law school? Did you have any notion that you wanted to be part of healthcare?
No, not at all. I thought I would do corporate business law, maybe some real estate transactional work. When I took my first job during law school, so you go as your 1L and you take all your introductory courses, contracts, property, torts, the basics. And then I got a summer associate position at the law firm that I ended up being employed at. And I hit it off really well with the employment law chair. Her name was Ann Zerby. She still practices employment law. But I really just got really into that type of work, and that has some litigation aspects of it. It's got some contracting aspects to it. Your discrimination, wage claims. We've represented employers, so I really got in that realm and sort of followed that through law school and thought I was going to be an employment lawyer with a side of litigation. Because I was on the National Trial Ad Society for my school. Um, Went to the national trial competition, won the excellence in litigation award there, which came with money. So knew I was probably going to be pretty good in a courtroom. So I was thinking employment, probably with a little bit of litigation when I graduated.
You know, that I never even asked you that question, and I apologize when we worked together because that explains so
Mm-hmm.
much of the skill set that you brought to the work that you and I did, and we'll get into that in a little
Yep.
bit.
Yep.
So tell us, what is your scope at your current position?
Oh my
What are
gosh.
the what, and also what issues are you spending most of your time on these days?
So obviously the typical regulatory transactional work, contracting that you would think would be part of a legal officer's job. Um, I oversee risk management here as well. And so in the claims and some of the insurance pieces, I manage our captive insurance company, which is totally new to me as chief legal officer. But probably what I'm spending most of my time with right now, not surprisingly, is government relations reports up to me. So with the new Trump administration, Virginia General Assembly just passed their budget. I'm spending a lot of time in that world, which is new. It fits with my background, understanding how bills become law and how a comma is really important in a particular piece of legislation. But that is definitely where I'm spending a lot of my time.
Yeah, so we're going to come back to the legislative issues in just a
Yeah.
second. You and I worked together on some of the
Hmm.
statutory things that happened in Florida, so we'll come back to that.
Hmm.
But as you describe the captive, we
Yep.
have a lot of physician leaders and aspiring physician leaders that
Hmm.
probably also don't know much about a captive. So
Yep.
broadly, why would a health system be interested in, and you can share whatever you'd like, whether it's the captive structure or another structure. Just give
Hmm.
the broad strokes to our listeners of what it means to have these things in place as it relates specifically to healthcare.
Yep. So our captive it's an insurance company. It's an insurance company that we own and control. It's a way that we can transfer risk and control that risk rather than going out to the commercial market and purchasing insurance just like a physician practice might do. We obviously have a bolus of claims and significant risks that we can transfer and create our own company.
And
Um,
Tim, and I'm
yep.
sorry to interrupt because our
Yeah.
listeners may be thinking about a health plan or they
Hmm.
may be thinking about health system liability. Which
Good point. That's a great point. This is for health system liability. So think professional liability, think medical malpractice claims, think general. We also have general liability, so slip and falls. We've also put our deductible of our cyber insurance into the captive. And we've also put our workers' comp and our employee, we self insure our health plan here, just like you would see at several health systems around. That is also in our captive insurance company.
and just to digress for a second,
Yep.
as an organization with employees, you follow ERISA, and you have a certain degree of responsibilities about how you provide a self-insured process to the
Mhm.
employees that are receiving their health plan benefits. Did I state that
Correct.
accurately?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I wanted you to explain that for a second because we have young physician leaders who listen to this show and other healthcare
Mhm.
administrators as well. And I don't think it's on their radar very much about the system has liability from all of
Mhm.
those different areas that you just outlined. And you and I would sit together and we would talk about potential actionable items, potential claims,
Mhm.
potential adverse events that could result in significant issues for the system. Um, and that was just on the care delivery side.
Right.
Like you
Right.
said, there's employee issues, workman's comp issues,
Mhm.
fall issues, structural
Mhm.
liability,
Oh, yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Well, we might have to have a whole nother show depending on the
Oh,
feedback
yeah.
if people want to hear about it. So let's go back to the legislative stuff.
Yes.
So what are the top one or two items that bubbled up either at the last session or
Ooh.
the upcoming session that you're working on?
So, I'll start with federal first because that's, reaches probably the majority of your listeners. I am paying attention, just like probably everyone is, that's involved in the process, on the budget reconciliation, mainly focusing on Medicaid. Very concerned from a health system. Probably all the health systems across the United States are watching this particular process, just because of the threats that there could be Medicaid cuts. What are those Medicaid cuts? How deep will the cuts be? Trump has said, I'm not planning on touching Medicaid, but I think that's to be seen on what really comes out of that process. So that is what I'm really paying attention to, what I'm watching. We are going to DC for American Hospital Association's Lobby Day, meeting with our senators here, as well as our representative that oversees the district where the health system is located. And we're going to be talking about what are those implications if certain portions of Medicaid are cut, and what does that look like for the community? So that's really the piece from a federal perspective we are paying attention to right now.
And some systems I'm familiar with have a substantial Medicaid population, and if cuts, look, we could go back to some of the changes that were created, and I want to say the third or fourth quarter, and maybe even just as some of the executive orders rolled out about disenrollment, people just no longer enrolling in Medicaid-based programs. And that alone, you see that, and there was a conversion last year, I believe, Tim. But the point is, if you have people and you're frustrated that it's 80, 70, 60 cents on the dollar with Medicaid, great. Be frustrated, because when it's 0 cents on the
Oh
dollar,
yeah.
forget it. Like, there's
Yeah.
a whole nother universe of economics that are going to drive some people nuts. So I don't know if I misstated anything. Please correct me.
No, I think you're right there from a health system perspective. Willing to talk about the current bill, obviously, on the physician fee, and what does that look like moving forward. And we are obviously paying attention to that because we do have a medical group. We want our docs to get paid for their services. That obviously helps us, especially our independent docs in the area. But going back to Medicaid, yeah, you're right. I mean, even 60, 70 cents on the dollar when we're treating these patients is a lot better than 0. And when Medicaids happen, people start losing insurance coverage. I mean, we still have to provide emergency services
That's
here,
right.
but that's exactly what's going to happen. Is our emergency room is going to see an uptick, I think.
Another quick digression is all the federally qualified health centers that rely on Medicaid payment for their patient population. If that disappears in any way, shape, or people disenroll, those health centers may collapse. Where are those people going to go
Yeah.
for generic ambulatory care, or important, but maybe not as urgent as the emergency room? And then they end up going to the emergency room because there is no federally qualified health center for them to go to. So
Right.
it's dramatic at a minimum. Okay, enough on legislative affairs. We don't want to bore our listeners. Listen, here's what people are curious about. At least this is where I'm curious about. You've been at various health systems across the eastern United States, and you have a lot of experience to draw upon. So when you begin to work with medical executive committee leaders, medical group physician leaders, what are you looking for? What kind of traits and attributes and competencies do you look for in the physician leaders you work with?
Um, that's an excellent question. I've thought about it a little bit since we've talked in the past, and I've worked with you. Um, I really look for someone who's curious. Now, you may say, "Well, we're physicians. We're all curious. We always care about what's going on in the data and how deep we want to get into issues." That is not always the case. And the reason why I say that is because there's a difference between a physician leader and a physician who's really good at their day-to-day job and getting things done. Um, and a good physician leader is interested in learning more about something they may not know about. And I am looking for that person who's curious and interested in learning more about what does it mean to be a physician leader? What does it mean to provide medical direction under a medical director services agreement? It's not just an additional tack on to my salary. You're getting that face time with administration. You're able to implement change. And that's what I'm interested in seeing as an administrator when I deal with my physician leaders. someone who wants to learn it, someone who wants to understand the medical staff process, someone who wants to understand why we have bylaws and what does that mean for me and what does that mean for the group that I'm representing. If they're not interested in learning, they could potentially be a barrier for the people they're trying to advocate for. So, yeah.
Great answer, because I'm thinking about some of the leadership classes you and I
Mhm.
attended together, and I can see our instructor, whose name I won't mention,
Mhm.
but very well respected instructor, telling us about one of the attributes of leadership is curiosity and
Mhm.
uh, learning. You might be a visual learner. You might like to read. You might like to listen to
Mhm.
podcasts.
Yeah.
But it's but it's all about that curiosity. And I think so. When you find someone who is curious and
Mhm.
wants to engage with you, but you detect, and this is an assumption on my part, that they have some lack of healthcare ecosystem literacy. They're illiterate
Mhm.
in this universe. How do you approach raising that skill set up?
Yeah. So the way I approach it is building a relationship first. I don't try to impose my knowledge or my will on them because, especially with doctors, that doesn't work. Um, it really
That's
is.
shocking, by the way. This
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
I'm going to call Sanjay Gupta because we got, never heard of this in the physician world,
Oh,
but keep
no,
going.
no. So what I find is the best way to educate a curious physician is to build that relationship. Show them that you're a partner and you want to be of service to them. You want to help them drive the initiative that they're looking to drive. And the best way to do that is be responsive, be professional, show them that you're a team member and that you want to partner with them. And then once you're there and once you've developed that relationship, then I can teach them, so to speak. I can show them how a medical staff process works. I can talk to them about contractual provisions because I've built that trust with them and they know that I'm not just I hate to say this, but not just another administrator out there. That can be a fearful word for a new physician leader.
Yeah, very wise counsel for anybody on either
Mhm.
side of this, whether you're a physician leader or a non-clinical leader. Build that relationship, build that trust, and then exchange that
Mhm.
information, and that'll only grow the relationship and raise everybody's IQ relative to whatever the issue is.
Yeah.
Are there any other attributes that you might want to draw out relative to chief medical officers or chief
Mhm.
physician executives as people are higher and
Yeah.
higher?
I think one thing, especially at that level of CMO, chief physician executive, be ready to make decisions that are tough. That may not feel good. One of the things that I absolutely despise, and again, sorry if I offend anyone out there about this, but I hate when I'm dealing with physician leaders who start thinking about when they're getting ready to discipline a physician or they need to discipline a physician for his actions, they start thinking about, well, what if I was in his shoes?
Mm.
I think that's a dangerous thought process to go down to for physicians because a lot of times you'll see them, you can see it. They will backtrack from where the decision that needs to be made or where they previously were because they're thinking about, hey, now I'm starting to feel for this guy when this guy, depending on where he is in the process, could be a bad actor and I need to take some sort of action to protect my physician enterprise, so to speak, as a whole. But now I'm starting to feel for the guy. Which I'm not saying empathy and sympathy is not important, but be ready to take that hard step and make that decision, even if it's going to impact someone's career or reputation, because it's necessary. There's a reason why you're the CMO. There's a reason why you're the chief physician executive, because you have to make those hard choices.
Yeah, brilliant. And it brings to mind two things. One, of course, physicians are, at least in my opinion, generically conflict averse, and I don't yet know
Mhm.
why that is, but it's everywhere I go. And another guest on the show reminded me that likability is not the measure of a
Mhm.
successful CMO. So if you want to be liked, Actually, two guests have said it in two different ways. If you want to be like, go sell ice cream.
Yeah.
That was
Yes.
that was
Yeah. No, that's perfect.
that was his
Perfect.
advice. But
Yeah.
here's the reality. Just as whether you're in a courtroom or in a deposition and you're
Mhm.
managing a side or a position or an interest, there are some tough things that have to be dealt with. But you're trained. Physicians are trained to
Mhm.
take, cold hard steel to slice something. And even though the patient is under anesthesia, the human mind is not organized for this behavior.
Mhm.
It's not organized to zap somebody with electricity to their chest to get their heart pumping again.
Right. Right.
And so we actually are trained in standing our ground, doing the right thing,
Mhm.
even if it will hurt you to cure you. And
Right.
I've never understood why. I mean, many people are very good at it, but I don't know why people fall into that trap when they have adequately been trained for it.
Mhm.
So you're spot on.
Yeah.
Well, what is one of the things that you would ask that physician executives stop doing? You talked about this backpedaling, you talked
Mhm.
about being curious. Are there things that drive you nuts and you just wish that physician
Yes.
executives would stop?
Yes. So again, this is your nature and it's hard to fix, but you guys want to know everything about everything sometimes before you're ready to make a decision. And
True.
it can be rather exhausting. Um and it's almost like you're trying to like diagnose. Like you can see your brain working and I'm like, "Oh no, we've lost." Um but but sometimes like you've got to get comfortable in the gray and
Yes.
and knowing, hey, I've got to make a decision because I've got several other things I need to do, and I've got to either trust whoever is going to be, I'm delegating this decision to, or I've got to be willing to be wrong. I mean, really, that's really some of it is. I find that you guys are probably, because you're so high functioning, right? Way more high functioning than lawyers. I can tell you that. We went to law school because we wouldn't crack it in med school. But 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 honestly, you got to be ready to make that decision and be wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, you're gonna make mistakes, especially the new ones, and you've got to be comfortable with that. Trust me. Remember, the mistake you make on the administration side isn't going to kill someone.
Hmm.
So just remember that, yeah, you're dealing with life and death on the medical side. Not so much here. You make a mistake, we're gonna fix it, we'll correct it, and we'll move on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
No, you've got us nailed. You're pretty
Yeah.
good. Yeah, we definitely have this insane desire to totally understand the subject, and ambiguity
Yes.
and gray are requirements of being in leadership. You got to get
Mhm.
comfortable with that stuff. Anything that you wish that physician executives would start doing more of beyond what we've
Yes.
already said?
Yeah. So not so much on the actually, yes, it would be part of your administrative duties. As a member of the C-suite and of the team, I think especially in today's world, it's important. I'm going back to legislative affairs, honestly.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's so important for you all to understand that, because I can tell you the rules, I can read bills, I can say exactly how things work administratively and legally, but you guys, I'm actually bringing our CMO with me next week to lobby day. Why? Because he's the face. He's the face of the community. He's going to tell the legislators the impacts on our patients and what that means. Because I can explain the problems and the processes, but you guys knowing exactly the problems and the processes, you guys can translate that into what does that mean for our patients. And they listen to doctors so much more about those types of issues than they listen to a lobbyist or a lawyer, because you're front lines. You understand it, you know the medicine, you know what that means, you know where it's going to go if things go south.
Yeah, this has been a conundrum in the healthcare in the United States for more than 100 years.
Mhm.
And I agree with you, but physician leaders in particular have been disenfranchised by the
Mhm.
traditional advocacy groups on a number of levels and for a number of reasons. And their mind goes to a place that I can't call anything but apathy about
Mhm.
this.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to see patients, or I just want to run the clinic, or I just want to do good at this where I'm at. And um, there is value to advocacy, and it may come down to individual local advocacy like
Mhm.
you are committed to, because at a national level, it becomes noise up there on
Right.
the hill, and to the extent that it gets to be distracting to the regular practicing physician. So I applaud you for asking or dragging your chief medical
Yeah, I
officer
think
with
it's
you.
it's a little bit of both. To be honest. I texted him this morning. I said, "Understand you will not be back here on Tuesday.
Yeah,
Like, don't schedule anything. Our last meeting is at 4:30." Like, yeah. So
that's
it
right.
it definitely is, but he's I mean, he's so articulate on the impact to patients. So
Yeah.
we need him there. Mhm.
Great. I'm excited to talk to you about this after the
Yeah.
fact and see what happens. Okay. So we want to talk about what has been the toughest fire that you and any of your partner CMOs throughout your career have put out.
Ooh, when I saw this question, I was like, I've been through so many things I don't remember. Um, but I mean,
Maybe that's trauma.
yeah, I
Maybe we
know.
need to do some trauma informed therapy to bring out what you don't
Uh,
want to
oh my
remember.
gosh, you probably remember more than I do of things that we've been through together, Lee. Honestly,
Well, we can come back to this at our
yeah.
next show. So that's fine if it doesn't
No,
come
I
off the
mean, the
top of
only
your
thing
head.
that I can think of is anything dealing with our wonderful, lawyer in Brevard that I love to deal with on a rather frequent basis was probably, the biggest fires that we've probably ever dealt with, and a lot of them had to deal with, physician behavior, physician quality, and medical staff issues.
Well,
Um,
let's frame it up in case we come back to it. That the issue is, and if anybody's had this experience, just email me later, and I'll give you my email at the end of the show, as I always do. Um, if the medical staff of your hospital hires their own attorney when technically the medical staff is the delegate of the board to
mhm,
oversee quality and safety and credentialing. So it has always boggled my mind that
mhm,
it's not an independent, there's no such thing in my brain as an independent medical staff. It is self-organized as per the bylaws, as per the conditions of participation,
mhm.
and they report to and are fiduciarily obligated to the board, and they go out and hire their own attorney. I
Yeah.
just find that remarkable. And I know there's case law behind that, but that was our fire, wasn't it?
Oh, every single time. Every single time because it was just and again, Lee, me, I felt like I was trying to be a team member with the medical staff. I eventually think I even got rapport with them, finally. But anytime I would be in there and I'm like, all right, this is going well, the medical staff are on board, and then that individual would pop up, I'm like, oh, this is gonna go south.
Yeah.
Because it generally did.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm,
That a classic,
mhm.
classic. Okay. All right. So, let's go on a little bit further and see, what
Okay.
is the hardest aspect for you personally of your job, as a legal officer in a health system? What's the hardest aspect for you as a person?
Me as a person
Mhm.
is probably when I see my colleagues doing something that I think is really stupid, um, but it's not illegal, and maybe there's no compliance issues to it, and it's something that they're permitted to do, and I have to step back and provide my advice and my opinion from a business perspective, but essentially that's not my job. That's that if they want to do something stupid, go ahead and do something stupid. I'll help you clean it up on the back end, so to speak. But that is probably the hardest is when I probably disagree from a business perspective on the direction we should be going. And I guess saying something stupid that probably is a little harsh, um, but something that I probably disagree with from a business perspective, and I think we should be doing something different. That's probably the hardest aspect of my position personally, for me.
And again, to be clear,
Yeah,
it's not unlawful, it's not
correct.
illegal.
Yes.
Are you referring to things that might butt up against morality or
No,
ethics?
I don't think that any ethical or moral issue. It's just maybe it's just a business decision. It truly is a business operational decision. And I'm like, well, I don't agree with that. I would do it this way. I have
Right,
to, step back and be like, well, that's not my job.
right.
Um, yeah. And
Yeah, we can expand that
uh
to this goes back to the difficulty of leadership.
yeah.
As you state, you could have an opinion, you could
uh
have a brief, an argument, whatever you lawyers want to call it,
Right.
why it has pros, cons, upside,
uh
downside, but ultimately it may not be your decision. And
Right.
somebody somewhere is going to make a potentially, it can either make the field goal or miss the
uh
field goal, win the
uh
game, lose the game. And I think that all of us as healthcare leaders are facing that more and more and more about very, very difficult decisions that appear from one set of perspectives to be the best decision we could make, and others may fight you on it. So
Oh yeah.
you too may be in a role where someone will do that to you and disagree. It's not unlawful, it's not illegal,
uh
it's not unethical, but they simply don't agree with you.
Right.
And as physician leaders, that will happen to you more often than you wish.
Yeah.
And back to your point, if the buck stops with you and you need to do something, you do it for the purposes of the organization.
uh
You may not be right, but at least be convicted. Con- Convicted doesn't sound right. Convinced of your appropriate value that you're giving the organization, and
uh
that's I'm just pulling out some of the elements of what you're referring to, how difficult this can be.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit it on the nail for your audience as well. Um, the chief, even from the chief medical officer, may be disagreeing with the chief operations officer, and it might be an operations decision, and that's going to be very difficult for a medical officer, I think, to step back and say, okay, this is not in my quote unquote swim lane, and more importantly, if the thing does go south and you were right, and I find myself have to step back sometimes. Don't say I told you so.
Right.
At least not so bluntly.
Later,
Yeah,
later.
because that doesn't, I
That doesn't go well.
my job again is to help clean up the mess. And if there's a mess to clean up, I'm in there cleaning it up and I'm gonna partner with them. And then when there's another, I would say the I told you so does come at that point. The I told you so really comes when there's another project and maybe you two are disagreeing on it. You say, remember last time when I said this and this is what
Yeah.
happened? And use it that way rather than throwing it back in someone's face.
Yeah, very smart
Yeah.
tactical move. That's a master class right there. Keep your mouth shut, save
Uh-huh.
it, put it in the bank, and then
Uh-huh.
draw it out later and
Yep.
cash that check. Right. You remember that time that I told you
Uh-huh.
to not put every associate in the auditorium because there was another COVID outbreak coming? Remember I
Yeah.
told you not to do that?
Right. Right.
And it worked out, didn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, now I'm telling you what I.
Yeah.
So, anyway, what do you think is the biggest fire in healthcare right now, in your opinion? That's part one. And part
Okay.
two, what do you think chief medical officers can do about that fire, in your opinion?
hmm Um, I think we've talked about it a lot. I mean, it really comes back right now. The biggest fire is, to me, it's Medicaid. Um, it really is what is going to happen with Medicaid, and what can the chief medical officer do about it is become invested uh, in portraying that message on the impacts to the community. Um, that really is where I see an extremely important use of the time of medical officers to partner with their legal officers, with their government relations team, with their CEO. I know, my CEO is heavily invested in this. I'm sure CEOs across the nation are paying close attention to the Trump administration, the budget reconciliation, his numerous executive orders that he just throws out like candy. Um, so I think that is the biggest fire right now in healthcare.
Yeah, and for our audience, we should we should let them know. And I'm only vaguely familiar with the part of Virginia that you're in,
Mhm,
except to say that it is. I consider it remote and rural, not like
mhm,
every place I've been to, not like every place you've been to, but that there are look. I've been into the middle of Brooklyn at a safety net hospital where it's almost all Medicaid. All
mhm,
right, and so right in the heart of New York City and out on the western side of Virginia,
mhm.
these are communities where people depend on this opportunity to pay for their care. And
Yep.
I think that I'm afraid that some people listen and they're in a nice suburb, in a nice
Yep.
hospital,
Mhm,
where their payer mix is not their issue. And fair enough, I get it. This is your choice where you work and live in, and all of that. But there's a tremendous amount of people who depend on this,
mhm.
tens of millions of people across the United States. So this is a big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. As physicians, you're always talking about access, right? You're always like, how can we improve access? How do we get patients in? How can we have them, have a great experience? Blah blah blah. Um, Cutting the funding source is going to impact access.
Yeah. One of
So,
one of the items that comes up on the show a lot is and people use different phrases and they actually mean different things. One is the corporatization of medicine, and the other is
mhm,
the financialization of medicine. And I feel like we're getting more and more stuck in the financialization, not that the corporation component isn't its own
mhm,
issue, but this is a financial and access issue
mhm.
that will bite a lot of people. Well, listen, we're about to wrap up the show. And on that note, I think I want to honor you with the very first virtual fire chief badge for a non
Awesome.
physician. You and I have worked together tirelessly during COVID and on so many legal conundrums, not to mention our fair share of medical staff 4 alarm fires
Oh
before
yeah.
and during and after the pandemic. And I want to publicly acknowledge that I learned a ton of things from you, and I want you to know that you have an honorary fire chief badge for your dedication and commitment to every community you have served. And Tim, it's a real pleasure having you on the
Awesome.
show.
Yeah, no, Lee. I mean, back at you. I mean, really, you've been one of my mentors throughout the process. I came in at Health First as a 34-year-old lawyer, and I left. Actually, I think you left a little bit before I did, but you definitely taught me how to engage with physicians, which that's invaluable in my profession. So I really appreciate that, and want to thank you so much.
Well, you are most welcome, and I'm glad we're reconnecting and hoping to encourage others to develop these relationships
Yeah.
between the chief legal officer and the chief medical officer,
Mhm.
and work together to solve what your local problems are. Well, you have been listening to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the CMO. Want to learn more about what it is like to be a CMO? Want to be on the show? Email me at leescheinbart@gmail.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can listen to the podcast on Apple, and you can also watch the videos of the shows on YouTube. Our show's website is thefirechief.podbean.com. I love talking with CMOs and CLOs from all over the United States, so please connect. Leave your reviews and your comments, and please share this with all of your colleagues. And in the words of Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, let's be careful out there.